Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neener Out Loud. If you are new here, me too. This is my first video on this channel. You may be familiar with my ASMR content over on Neenerland ASMR or Neenerland Recaps. This channel is going to be similar to my recap channel where I talk about my favorite movies, TV shows, documentaries, but I will be using my regular speaking voice instead of whispering. We're yapping and recapping over here. I particularly love to cover horror content, so I plan on doing a lot of that over here. And for my first video, I want to cover the new horror film Obsession. This came out earlier this year and it is phenomenal to say the least. Best movie I have seen in a long time, probably since Sinners. The movie was written and directed by Curry Barker. It is just over 100 minutes long and we've got a lot to go over, so let's get this show on the road. We begin with our main character, Bear. He's in a diner confessing his feelings to someone named Nikki. He is down bad for this girl, but turns out this is not Nikki. It's a waitress at the diner, and Bear is just practicing on her. He's there with his friend Ian, who's trying to help him out, but Bear is extremely awkward and has zero confidence or game. Ian suggests that he be playfully mean to her by bringing up a childhood nickname that she hated, Freaky Nikki. Bear's like, yeah, no, why would I ever do that? He wants to spend time with Nikki alone, but anytime he invites her anywhere, Nikki invites Ian. He wants to ask her out at trivia that night, but Ian says no because trivia night is sacred. Ian tells Bear, you have all the time in the world to ask her out. You've got nothing but time. So Bear arrives home later and finds his cat Sandy dead on the floor and realizes that she has eaten some prescription pills, and he says, how did you get into these? He puts them back in the medicine cabinet and we see that they are oxys and they are prescribed to someone named Barbara Bailey. Now Bear's real name is not Barbara, it's actually Baron. These pills belong to his grandmother who recently passed away and left her home to Bear. Here's the thing. Cats really can't open medicine cabinets, and they sure as hell can't open childproof pill bottles, so Sandy's accidental OD more than likely happened because Bear left the open pill bottle out somewhere. He is careless, to say the least. So Bear cleans up and we see him put Sandy in a trash bag. This is your pet. Later, Bear is apparently extremely sad and we see him sobbing in bed as we get the Obsession title card. He's crying in an interesting way. It's almost like a patterned sob, and we will circle back to this later. We see him in bed, scrolling through Nikki's social media when she calls him. She asks him about trivia night, and he tells her that he doesn't think he's going to make it, and she's disappointed. She says that she had something she wanted to tell him. She's putting in her 2 weeks at their job. Nikki convinces Bear to go to trivia night, and on his way there, he stops at a crystal shop to buy Nikki a new necklace. She had dropped her crystal necklace down the drain when she was on the phone with Bear earlier, and he's obviously trying to win some brownie points. He wants something with good energy, and he talks with the shop owner and considers citrine, but decides that Nikki would hate it for some reason, and he doesn't even end up buying her one. What he finds instead is something called a One-Wish Willow. It's a gimmicky novelty item. Break the stick, your wish comes true. I'm unsure why Bear would think Nikki would want that, but okay. The cashier says if you use it, don't come back and complain. And Bear's like, do people complain because it's a scam? or does it work and it like ruins their lives? And he's laughing, and the cashier says, or they die, or they wish they were dead. Later, Bear is at trivia night with Nikki and Sarah and Ian. They all work together at a music store that Sarah's dad owns. Bear is trying to signal to Ian that he wants to talk to Nikki alone, and Ian's like, dude, not tonight. While this is going on, Nikki and Sarah are talking about Nikki writing her book and about Sarah wanting to be a tattoo artist and getting into art school. So Nikki goes up to the bar to order shots, and Bear sees his opportunity and eagerly tags along. He orders a pina colada because he doesn't like the taste of alcohol, and Nikki kind of ribs him for this. It seems maybe a bit flirty, but mostly probably just friendly. He tries to pay for the drinks, and Nikki won't let him. Bear attempts to tell Nikki that he got her a present earlier, but Ian interrupts. He tells them, Sarah just told me that her dad keeps a in the break room safe, which seems random, but it's not. Nikki goes on to ask Bear what he was saying, and he's like, I'll just tell you later, because now Sarah has joined them at the bar. They get their shots, and Bear tries to cheers to Sandy, but Ian and Nikki get distracted by trivia starting, and they don't hear him. So Sarah asks, why cheers to Sandy? And he tells her he died. She's very sad for Bear and gives him a big hug, which he seems a little bit uncomfortable with. So trivia night is over. Nikki wants to go home, so Bear says that he will drive her. And Sarah is bummed because she really wanted Bear to go out drinking with her and Ian. Nikki asks if anyone has any cash, and Sarah gives her a $20 bill. She goes right over and gives it to the unhoused man sitting outside the bar and talks to him for a minute. Bear watches her, clearly endeared. When Nikki takes the cash, Sarah says, great, I just bought a guy's hair for the week. And I think she's like greatly underestimating the cost and also kind of judgmental. When they part ways, Ian tells Bear, get your girl home safe. And immediately Nikki hits him and says, ew, don't say that. On the ride home, Nikki tells Bear that she's sorry about his cat, and if he needs someone to talk to, she's there for him. Bear says it's going to be weird not seeing her every day, and she says, I'm just not happy there. He looks kind of indignant and says, it's just a job, Nikki. Nikki says she wants to write, but she needs to feel inspired to be able to write a love story, and she's just not. Bear says, so you're writing a romance? And she says, no, it's a love story. And this line really made me think, especially in context of the movie, because she's right. A love story and a romance are not the same thing, and this movie just proves that a love story can absolutely be a horror story. Bear doesn't get it, though, and says, isn't that the same thing? She tells Bear that he's really only one that she gets to talk to about this stuff, and says, especially at work, because you're not a complete brick wall. She kind of looks a little forlorn when she's saying this to him. Bear then tells Nikki that he got her something, and Nikki says, ew, oh my god, why does that make me nervous? They pull up to Nikki's, and she tells Bear that Sarah has a crush on him, and she wants to know how he feels. Bear says he likes her as a friend, but that's really it. Nikki says, when I have a crush on someone, no one can tell. And then she says goodnight, and she heads inside. Bear tries and fails to keep the conversation going, and as she's walking away again, Bear says, night, freaky Nikki. And she stops dead in her tracks and says, why did you call me that? She sighs and says, Bear, do you like me? You better tell me now if you do. She doesn't seem curious, but rather, oh great, I'm gonna have to break this kid's heart. He's like, no, we're just good friends. So she says good and walks away. Bear is upset. He has missed his shot, but it was very clear the feeling was not mutual from Nikki's side. Bear then remembers the One Wish Willow. He pulls it out and it sings a little song. He says, I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the fucking world. He snaps it, sits for a second, then starts his car. He looks over at Nikki's house, and she's standing on her porch. all we see is her silhouette. She is backlit from the porch light, and it is such a cool shot. Probably my favorite of the whole movie. She walks up to the car and reminds Bear that he had something to give her. And he kind of panics and says, "Oh, I forgot it at home." Nikki sounds a little sad and asks Bear if he wants to come inside. She says, "I did just lose my cat." "Oh, wait, I mean, you lost your cat? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. Do you want to come inside?" She's acting weird and she seems confused herself and keeps saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry." Bear is also confused and he says, "Nikki, I think you're drunk." She laughs and says, "I'm not," and then seems to snap out of it and says, "Wait, what the fuck?" She is panicked but immediately goes back into this weird state and says, "I'm acting so weird." So she ends up getting in Bear's car and says, "Let's go to your place." He tells Nikki that she's freaking him out and she gets really upset. She says she's messed up. She tells Bear that she can't be alone right now. Her dad is dying and she's just having a really hard time. So he ends up bringing Nikki to his house. He puts Nikki to bed and she asks if he can sleep with her. He's hesitant, but he agrees. She takes her top off and he is internally panicking. He sits in bed next to Nikki and she starts to scoot in close to him, and she eventually leans in to kiss him. He stops momentarily, but they do start to kiss. Now remember, he thinks that she's fucked up, and she even told him that she was. They're kissing for a second, and Nikki opens her eyes and screams, "What the fuck?" and jumps backwards. But then immediately pops up and says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Bear is freaked out and confused, and Nikki just keeps apologizing, saying, "It was a panic attack. It was a panic attack." It was not. She starts sobbing, and it's incredibly similar to the way Bear cried earlier about his cat. So, what's happening now is there are two versions of Nikki. The version that Bear wished for, who most of the fandom calls Freaky Nikki or Wish Nikki, and the real Nikki. And real Nikki has moments where she's able to break through this facade that Bear has manifested, and this will continue in different ways throughout the film. We cut to the middle of the night, and Bear is now sleeping on the floor. He decides to go online and look up if the One Wish Willow is real. He finds a Reddit post with some people saying it's real and some people saying it's not. So he goes back to the bedroom and Nikki asks if he can lay with her again, and he does. In the morning, Bear wakes up alone. In the kitchen, he finds a memorial for Sandy that Nikki made. There's a card, there's a candle, and Sandy's dead body. Earlier, we saw Bear put Sandy in a trash bag, so Nikki tells Bear that he was supposed to like the memorial, and he says, "No, Nikki, this is so messed up." So they go into work that day, and Ian is like, "Spill the tea, girl. What happened last night?" Bear's like, "I had a crazy night," and Ian says, "You Nikki, you dog." Bear's like, no, there's something going on with her." So the whole time he's having this conversation with Ian, we can see Nikki in the background staring at Bear the whole time. He tells Ian that Nikki's dad has cancer, and Ian says, "Her dad in Washington that she doesn't even care about?" He tells Ian that he thinks Nikki might be having a mental breakdown. She was kissing him one second and sobbing the next, and Ian's like, maybe she was just on Molly. After work, Nikki starts walking to Bear's car, and he says, "Oh, Nikki, I don't think that I can drive you home today." She's like, "That's okay, I was just getting my purse," and she gets a ride home with Ian. So later that night, Bear is chat GTPing about the effects of Molly. His recent searches are on the side, and they are old people's home, oxycodone, how to know if you've been friend-zoned, how to woo a girl, how to play Green Day's Basket Case on marimba, and classic romance novels. This tells a bit of an interesting story, especially if you know the lyrics to Basket Case. Anyway, he's on the phone with Ian asking if he talked to Nikki on the way home, and he said that Nikki seemed fine. Now, while this conversation is happening, you can see a shadow outside of Bear's window, and then it walks to the front door after a minute, and the doorbell rings. When he answers, it's Nikki in a very pretty red dress, and her face is kind of shrouded in darkness a bit. This happens a lot in the film. Once freaky Nikki is brought into existence, there's a lot of symbolism with like red and her being in shadows. So when she was in the car telling Bear that she couldn't be alone because her dad is sick, her head was on the dashboard so we couldn't see her face, and the light was making her hair look bright red when it's really like a very dark brown. And she shows up to Bear's house kind of in the dark of the sidewalk wearing this red dress. Nikki apologizes for the night before. She admits that she was drunk and on Molly. She says she remembers some things that happened, but that she doesn't think Bear took advantage of her or anything. Nikki says, "I know you like me, Bear." And he says, "No, do you like me?" And Nikki tells him that she started to get feelings for him around Christmas. And I wasn't really sure about what this meant. It's never really like revisited again if Christmas has any sort of significance or whatever, but her face is still kind of in the shadows here, and we can see her features, but they look just a little bit off. Like her eyes are extra glassy, and it's just this weird juxtaposition to Bear, whose face is fully illuminated, and it's something that they do with Nikki a lot in this film. So they admit their feelings for each other, and then we get a montage of several scenes of them over the next probably couple of days, just typical couple things. But one of them is Nikki showing Bear an AI image of the two of them that says, "I want to wear your skin as a sweater." Now, unfortunately, this is not a foreshadow, but I really do wish it was. But this part is interesting because Nikki is a writer, and she would absolutely not use AI. But from what we've seen, Freaky Nikki has kind of adapted some of Bear's habits, and we know he uses AI, so I think that's just kind of what's happening here. We see a few scenes of them at work, and Ian, Sarah, and even their boss look extremely confused about their relationship. We get a scene of them out to dinner, and Nikki is wearing a necklace with a little bee on it. She's fully committed. He asks about her dad, and she doesn't want to talk about it. Nikki asks Bear what he wants to do with his life because she doesn't really know, and he says, "I don't know, maybe a food critic or something." Like, he's not even sure about it. He doesn't seem to have any real interest and just picked food critic because he'll get free food. Ian calls him twice while they're out on this date, and eventually he picks the phone up. He walks off, and we see Nikki behind him just staring. Ian tells him that he looked into Nikki's dad, and he is totally fine. He's not sick at all. And he also tells Bear that Sarah and Nikki had a conversation just the day before the two of them got together, and Nikki told Sarah that she thinks of Bear like a little brother. Ian tells him something is up, man. It's like Nikki snapped into a different person, and Bear is getting aggravated. He's thinking back on the wish he made and kind of connecting the dots. So Bear just hangs up the phone and goes back to the table looking irritated. He starts to ask her about her dad again, but stops, and she hands him a gift. It's a tiger's eye stone, and it belonged to her mother, but now she wants Bear to have it. She says tiger's eye brings confidence and willpower, so now he can be a food critic, which, like, she just found out about, and she already had the gift wrapped and ready to go, so that's not why she's giving it to him. More on that later. He asks why she gave it to him, and she says, "Bear, I love you so much." And he says, "You love me more than anyone in the world?" He asks Nikki if her dad is really sick, and she says, "No, no, 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 no." She gets up and is maniacally saying, "No, don't do that." She starts crying and says, "Why does that matter? I thought we were having a nice date." He says, "We are, it's okay, it's okay." And she calms down and asks him, "Then why does it matter?" And Bear says, "It doesn't matter to me." We're about to see one of the most jarring and sad scenes in the movie. Smash cut to them fucking. Bear has his head buried in Nikki's neck, and Nikki is making noises as if she's enjoying herself, but her face is completely blank and devoid of any happiness. And the actress even said that Nikki was crying. That scene made me sick to watch. Even on my rewatch, I was like, I don't need to see this again. I'm just going to click through it. So Bear wakes up in the middle of the night, alone again, and Nikki is standing in the corner of the room watching him sleep. She is against the wall, kind of hidden in the shadows, and when she steps toward Bear, she moves in such a weird, unnatural way. It's like she peels herself off from the wall. It is very weird. There are a lot of uncanny valley moments in this movie, and those scare the hell out of me. He asks Nikki to come back to bed, and she says, no. Then she says, I don't like my dreams, in a very unsettling, high-pitched voice. We get a closer look at her face, but it's not her face. It's distorted. She starts sobbing, again in the same way that Bear cries. She says, I feel like you don't love me as much as I do, and then says, it's not mutual, in this distressing and painful tone. And it's not mutual. And in this moment, I believe this is the real Nikki breaking through. Freaky Nikki says, I feel like you don't love me as much as I do. But then real Nikki is responding, screaming out, it's not mutual. And just keep in mind, this is probably just an hour or so after Bear assaulted her. So real Nikki is still occupying some part of her own mind and experiencing the things that she's being forced to do. Bear's wish has completely taken her autonomy. Bear is scared to death and tries to get her to come back to bed. She tells him, go back to sleep, in the creepiest voice, and he does, or at least he pretends to. I mean, how could anybody sleep after that? So he rolls over and Nikki screeches, why don't you love me? So he's looking around the room for her and he can't find her, and all of a sudden she just appears to his right, holding this vase of flowers over her face as she like side scampers across the room. There's no other way to explain it, but it's horrifying. So she scampers like over to the side of the bed, holding this vase in front of her face, because like they don't want us to see her face clearly, right? And Bear's about to have a heart attack, which actually I kind of just wish he would have. So she's standing there for an uncomfortable amount of time, and Bear's like, what's going on? And then she just casually sets the flowers on the nightstand and says, they're for Sandy, okay? And she's like totally back to normal. She gets into bed like nothing totally weird just happened. After a minute, Bear tries to get out of the bed and Nikki screeches, stay. The next morning, Bear notices that Nikki has cut a piece of his hair and he finds her sitting on the couch. She's reading a book upside down because she's not really reading it. He asks if she cut his hair and she just very casually says, yeah. And he's like, yeah, let's not do that. And she looks kind of sad and says, okay. He asks about last night and says that was terrifying. Nikki is really embarrassed and just apologizes profusely. She says, I had a nightmare and how's this? And she starts smiling with every muscle in her face. Like, it had to hurt. She was smiling so hard. And he's like, not great. He tries to continue the conversation, but she kisses him, and this appeases him. She says, I love you so, so much. And he makes her promise not to do anything weird anymore. No watching him sleep or moving around weirdly. She agrees and apologizes more. He's like, okay, we're good. Bear gets up to go to work and he just stops and stares at something that we cannot see for a minute. Well, it turns out Nikki has totally covered the front door in duct tape. and Bear is like struggling to pry the door open. And I thought for sure Nikki was not going to let him leave, but he eventually does get out with no issue. So Nikki is standing in the living room, smiling unnaturally as he leaves, and even after he closes the door, she just stands there with that huge, unnatural grin on her face. And the camera pans down, and we see that she is peeing her pants. At work, Bear opens the lunch that Nikki had packed him and finds a couple of Polaroids. The first one is a photo of Bear, and Nikki wrote, "You" on it. And the next is a photo of Nikki and Bear while he's sleeping, and Nikki wrote, "Not me," under her face. So Bear just pushes that aside and starts to eat his lunch with Sarah. Now, Nikki also left him a note saying, "For my little food critic." Sarah asks him if he's going to be going to Ian's party that night, and Bear's like, "Well, I haven't heard anything about it." He tells Sarah, "I heard what you told Ian about Nikki." And she says, "It's just weird that you guys are like intensely dating all of a sudden." And Sarah is worried that Nikki is taking advantage of Bear. Yikes, girl. Like, you and Ian both think something mentally is going on with Nikki, but you're worried that she is taking advantage of him? Sarah tries to tell Bear something else that she thinks he needs to know, but her dad interrupts her. She got a letter from one of the colleges she applied to. They walk away to open it, and it's a rejection. She goes back down to sit with Bear, and she's upset. She's waiting on just one more college response, and she has gotten nothing but rejection so far. She puts her head on Bear's shoulders, and he comforts her. She laughs and tells him, "Your lips smell weird." Which, like, that's a really weird comment to make, right? Your lips smell weird? Why wouldn't it just be like, "Ew, Bear, your breath stinks," or like, "Ooh, you need a mint"? So she gets up and snatches the post-it note from his lunch, and she's reading it and laughing. And then she says, "What's the verdict on Cat? What does that mean?" So she holds up the note to him, and it says, "What's the verdict? Cat." Sarah is laughing and asking what it means, but Bear looks at his partially eaten sandwich and has the horrifying realization that Nikki has cooked Sandy and made a sandwich out of him. Mind you, it's been like a week since Sandy died at this point. Also, how the fuck did Bear take a bite out of a decomposing cat sandwich and not immediately realize something was off? So he pukes, obviously. After work, Bear gives Ian a ride home, and Ian says, "So are we going to talk about Nikki?" He's questioning Bear. "First you said she's having a mental breakdown. Now you two are in love. She's lying about her dad being sick. What's going on?" Bear deflects and says, "Oh, I heard you're having a party tonight, by the way. Why didn't you invite us?" And Ian's like, "Oh, so now you're in us?" Ian says, "I'm not inviting you guys because Nikki is going through something and it kind of looks like you're taking advantage of her. I'm saying this with love, but this looks bad, dude." Bear says, "She's the one that won't leave me alone." Just immediately putting the blame on the woman whose autonomy he has snatched away. Super cool. So Ian invites Bear. Just Bear. He says, "Listen, if everything's cool, Nikki won't care if you come to have a boys' night." So Bear arrives home and he's practicing what he's going to say to Nikki while still in the car about, cooking the cat. As he's grabbing his bag, he hears the jingle from the One Wish Willow go off, and he pulls it out of his bag and sees that there is a customer service number on the back. So he calls, and just some guy answers. It's not like a business line, it's just some guy that says hello. And actually, it's Curry Baker who answers, which was pretty interesting. So Bear asks if there's any way he can alter a wish. He doesn't want to reverse it, he just wants to alter it. And Curry says, "You'd like to cancel your wish?" And Bear says, No, I just want to alter it." Curry tells him it's not possible, and Bear asks if it's even real, and Curry says, "Yeah, it's real." Bear says, No, her love for me, is it real?" And Curry says, "Just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real." Bear then asks to cancel the wish. Not possible. Curry tells him the only way to end this wish is for you to die. Curry says you have a moral obligation to be there for her. And Bear asks him why Nikki is acting so bizarrely and not like herself. I don't know, man. Maybe it's because you made her a prisoner in her own mind and have taken away all her free will. Curry asks if Bear wants to talk to her, and we hear Nikki just screaming and crying in like torturous pain on the other end of the phone, and Bear can't handle it because he's a sissy and he hangs up. So what Bear should have done here is driven his car into a tree, but instead he goes inside. He finds Nikki in the exact same position that he left her in, standing in the living room, waiting for him in the pitch black. She hasn't moved all day. She is a mess. We saw her pee herself right after Bear left, but it looks like she's also puked all over herself too. So she's so happy to see him, but Bear's like, oh my god, what happened? She says, oh, I ate a bug, or I have a stomach bug, or both. She tells Bear that she's going to shower and then clean up after herself, and she apologizes and says, I was just waiting for you to come home. So he's standing outside the bathroom and he tells her, we talked about doing weird things, and then asks, Nikki, did you cook the cat? He says, you can't do that. And then he's very upset about it. And she just says, okay, honey. So Bear's just like, all right, cool then. Listen, I'm going to go to Ian's tonight for boys' night. And she immediately shuts the shower off. And she says, I'll go with you. And he's like, well, it's boys' night, so... Nikki's like, well, that's weird because Sarah told me she's going, but I guess I'll just stay here. So Bear is scared to death and he's like, no. I really want you to come. And then Nikki just screams in agony, and it almost sounds like she's saying, let me go. And I think we can interpret this as real Nikki pleading to be released, or freaky Nikki actually wanting to go with Bear. So the next scene, Bear has brought Nikki to Ian's. They're playing this truth or dare Jenga game, and Nikki is holding on to Bear, like staring lovingly at him. Someone pulls a piece that says switch seats with someone, and he picks to switch seats with Bear so he can sit next to Nikki. And Nikki kind of protests a little, but he tells her, it's going to be okay. And this means that Bear is now sitting next to Sarah. Now, as they're switching seats, the guy says, geez, Bear, what kind of spell did you put on her? And everyone laughs, but Nikki laughs a lot harder and a lot longer than everyone else. So if you're wondering if Nikki understands that Bear has done something to her, I think this scene hints at it, but the next scene just completely confirms it. So it's Nikki's turn to pull a piece, and we don't know what it says, but she gets up and reads an excerpt from her book. It is a bizarrely fucked up version of Hansel and Gretel in which Gretel SAs Hansel. So I'm going to read like a quote or two from what she wrote. He would relent and choose to be inside me like he had many nights before. If not, I would fillet his meaty forearm, roll it like a stick of licorice, and insert the flesh between my legs. She goes on, staring at Bear. Hansel is my soul. Only the branch of a willow tree could conjure. Brother, you will be inside me tonight. Holy shit. Fantastic. Get this girl an Oscar. And the thing is too, they were playing this drinking game. So if she didn't want to do the dare, she could have just drank. But she wanted to do the dare. So some part of her wanted to get this out there for Bear to hear it, right? Bear, of course, looks extremely uncomfortable, as he should. He knows that Nikki thought of him as a little brother. That monologue was a clear indicator that real Nikki does not love Bear and that Bear is abusing her. And then he has the nerve to be angry about this? Oh, Bear. After that, the party is awkward, but the game continues. It's his turn, and he has to kiss the person to his left, Sarah. Nikki shoots up out of her seat with this giant, exaggerated frown on her face. She walks behind Sarah and just stands there for a minute, and I swore to God she was gonna in this moment, but she didn't. Instead, she just pulls Sarah's chair backwards and kneels down next to Bear and puckers up. Now, also, here's the thing, too. Again, Bear didn't have to read out "kiss the person to your left." He could have just thrown the brick down and drank. But he did this, and he had to know this would piss Nikki off, right? Like, Bear, you're the worst. So everyone at the party is just watching this like, what in God's name? And Bear gives her a kiss and she nearly melts. She says, "No one on this earth will ever comprehend how much I love you." And then she turns to the party and yells, "And everyone in this room will die," never knowing the strength of connection I have with my bear. After some silence, Ian asks Nikki if she's okay, and she laughs and says, "Come on, guys, it's just a joke." And no one laughs, and she says, "All right, fine, it's not a joke, deal with it." After more silence, Ian asks, "Who wants Jello shots?" And Nikki is kind of caressing Bear's hair, and she suddenly snaps out of it again. She falls backwards, terror away from Bear. She starts screaming, "It's not me, it's not me." And she grabs a glass bottle off the table, breaks it, and stabs herself in the face. She quickly goes back to Wish Nikki and says, "I'm so sorry," as her face is bleeding. Bear is sitting there, not even moving. He's totally disconnected, and everyone is like, "Jesus Christ, Bear, do something." He won't even look at Nikki. We see Bear take Nikki to the hospital, and she is just like dancing outside the car while Bear is arguing with the nurse. And it's inferred that the nurse won't treat Nikki, most likely because she doesn't consent to it. And this seems a little innocuous at first, but I do like that they included it to continue with the theme of consent and Nikki's autonomy. Now back home, Freaky Nikki can tell that Bear is upset, and she tries to comfort him. He asks her why she did that and says that she's scaring everyone. Nikki apologizes and says, "I know Sarah likes you." And Bear snaps and yells, "Everything was normal." Then he calms himself down and says, "I'm sorry, you're so beautiful, and you are normal. You are normal." But he's trying to convince himself and not her. He asks Nikki if she likes him, and she says, "I love you." But he wants to know if she likes him. He says, "Is Nikki back? Does Nikki like me?" "Babe, Nikki was never here. Not since you made that goddamn wish. And no, she does not like you." She gets an extremely unsettling look on her face and says, "I'm your Freaky Nikki," and he loses it. He tells her that he wants this to work so badly, and he just suggests that she go home for the night. Maybe they need some space. She starts bawling like a baby, wailing, and he yells, "Just be normal, Nikki." She is pleading with him and screaming, I can be, I'll be anything you want me to be." Now, Nikki is screaming and crying and saying, "I can be Nikki, I can be." But I've seen a lot of people saying that she's said, "I can't be Nikki." The script is available online, or at least like an older version of it. And in the script, it is Freaky Nikki saying, "I can be Nikki," because she's trying to please Bear. But I can see why people would think it's real Nikki slipping through screaming, "I can't be Nikki," because she cannot be the Nikki that Bear wants her to be. I think either one works, but from what I've read in the script, she's saying, "I can be Nikki." So Bear is crying and says, "It's not real," and Nikki tearfully tells Bear that she loves him in every reality. He says, "I love you too," and suddenly Nikki gets up and starts walking backwards in this really inhumane way. And as she's walking, we hear Nikki's distorted voice saying, "I think, rail me, rail my guts." And that's just what I've read from Reddit because I wasn't able to decipher it. So Nikki is standing in the kitchen and we can only see her silhouette. She's backlit and she's in the shadows, and Bear is terrified. But she very sweetly tells him, "Don't be scared, I'd never hurt you." She then lunges at him, so it seems like real Nikki, took the body back for a millisecond before she is stopped. Bear is just scared to death. He stares at Nikki, who is basically just a shadow, and he tries to reason with her and says, "I'm gonna go sleep at Ian's, but I'll be back in the morning." And Nikki just says, "Okay," and walks away. She starts making a lot of noise and like screaming in the other room, and Bear yells out, "Nikki, what are you doing?" So she calmly walks back in the doorway and delivers another wildly chilling monologue about how she will literally die, like cease to exist, slip into nothingness if Bear leaves. And she delivers it in such a cold and creepy robotic voice, then flips right into this cheery demeanor and says, "Or you could stay," and just walks away. And Bear's just staring, like totally freaked out. Now, in the next scene, they're in bed and Nikki is sleeping on Bear's chest and he's wide awake. It's 2:45 a.m. and he gets a text from Sarah saying that she needs to talk to him and she wants to meet. He says that he can't, but she's like, "If you don't come to me, I'm going to show up at your house." So he slips away from Nikki, who remains sleeping, and I want to point out that Nikki's face is still a mess from when she stabbed herself in the face at the party. Bear didn't even bother to help her clean up. The woman who he is supposed to love, he just left her to be a bloody mess. This scene is one of the worst in the movies. It was another one that I felt like really, really anxious about watching again. It's an actual gut punch. So Bear is trying to creep out of the room quietly, and he's startled when he hears Nikki say, "Bear, kill me, please." And at this point, we see that Nikki is sleeping. So it's real Nikki talking to Bear. Nikki says, "She's sleeping. It's me." Bear looks upset and he says, "You are you, Nikki." Nikki shushes him and says, "Please don't wake her up." And she's crying and says, "Just kill me." Bear gets this indignant look on his face and says, "What's so bad about being with me?" "Sir?" Nikki says, "I've never been with you, Bear." We hear Nikki continue to beg Bear to kill her as he just backs out of the room. Ugh, the scene makes me sick. You are a loser and a coward, Bear. Now we see this motherfucker meeting up with Sarah. She asks about Nikki. Bear tells her that she's acting oddly because her dad is dying. And Sarah says she hates her dad. They're not even close. Bear says, "Well, they are now, and I've been helping her through it." Sarah's like, "That's not your responsibility, Bear. She's taking advantage of you." The real tragedy of this film is not one single person is actually trying to help Nikki. Sarah is supposed to be her good friend, and here she is telling Bear that he's being taken advantage of. If Sarah was her true friend, she would actually try to talk to Nikki instead of putting herself between her and Bear. Bear tells Sarah that he's not being taken advantage of. So she's got her last letter from college and wanted to open it with Bear. They make a joke about Sarah tattooing her dad in his sleep, and Bear says, "I literally have sleeping pills in my pocket. We can make it happen." So the speculation with this is he's drugging Nikki. That's why in the previous scene, real Nikki was able to speak for so long while the body remained asleep. Bear's the worst. Before they open the letter, Sarah drops the bomb that Ian and Nikki have been casually hooking up for a couple of years, and Ian thinks that Nikki is only with Bear to piss him off. Then we take a hard left, and Sarah says, "Even if that's not true, I think you need someone more chill." And Bear says, "Like you?" Even though this man got what the fuck he asked for, he's still gonna cheat? Are you kidding me? Men. Now, this bitch Sarah says, "Well, I was to your left in the game. You were supposed to kiss me." Before she can even finish her sentence, we see Nikki running up to the car, smashing the window with her head. And then she puts a brick on the steering wheel and repeatedly bashes Sarah's face into it until she's basically ground beef. Bear sits there petrified as Nikki slams her face about 24 times. It's brutal. And every time she slammed her face into the brick, the horn honked a little, and I'm sorry, I thought that was hilarious. When Nikki bashed herself in the face earlier, Bear could not look at her, and he doesn't look at her here either. While it's happening, he's just like staring forward towards the dashboard. Even when Nikki tries to console him after, he's just dead in the eyes. He can't face reality of what's happening in front of him or any part of his life. He is a little bitch. Nikki says, "I'm sorry you had to see that, baby, but it was kind of your fault. Just remember that you wanted this, and I'm so happy for you. Clock it, queen." Meanwhile, we see that the only recognizable part of Sarah's face is an eyeball. Nikki tells Bear that he has to help her get rid of the body, and he's like, no, 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 no. He's horrified, and Nikki confronts him more and says, honey, I know, but this was all your fault. You wanted this. You wished for this. Keep telling him, babe. So Bear does indeed help Nikki get rid of Sarah's body. They're at the music store, and they load it into what looks like a case for a tuba. Nikki tells Bear, just go home, and she'll handle it from there. So we see Bear in his car. He's holding the now extremely bloody letter that Sarah got. He opens it and she got into the college that she wanted. Oh well, sorry, Sarah. So now Bear just starts screaming in his car. And next we see him, covered in blood, going back to the crystal shop. Now, what the woman said earlier is making a lot of sense. If you use this, don't come back and complain. Now, there's a man working there now, and Bear cannot find the One Wish Willows, and he's freaking out, screaming at the employee. And the guy's like, listen, I don't know what you're talking about, but it is way too early for you to come in here with all that angry energy. Also, I'm just messing with you. They're right there. He says, I get it. You made a wish, and now you want to reverse it, but the box is full of warning labels. He sees the bears, covered in blood, and is like, oh my God, what did you do? So Bear tells him she's obsessed with me, and he's like, oh, that's not so bad. He tells Bear, well, you can't make another wish, but you could ask her to do it, because she'd probably do anything for you. Or you could die. I'm just spitballing here. So he buys the willow, and he tries to make another wish, but it won't break, because everyone only gets one. Bear goes to Ian's, and he's like, what the fuck, man? He asks if Nikki is okay, because Bear's covered in blood, and apparently Nikki has texted Ian dozens of times to come over. Bear gives Ian the cliff notes and says that he needs to use this One Wish Willow to reverse Bear's wish. Ian obviously thinks that Bear is batshit crazy, and he's trying his best to convince Ian to make a wish, and it almost seems like Ian is starting to believe him, but Bear says, I need you to make a wish, and then you can be with Nikki. So Ian's like, oh, that's what this is about? Bear says, no, 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 I don't care about that at all. Just please make this wish and be careful how you word it. So Ian rips the willow out of the box, and before Bear can even tell him what to say, Ian wishes for $1 billion and snaps it. Bear starts screaming, no, as hundreds of thousands of bills rain down on them. So Ian's in disbelief and Bear is devastated. Bear goes back home and tries to get Nikki to make the wish for him. The first thing he sees is a very bizarre shrine that Nikki has crafted for Bear and Sarah. And as he's looking at that, we see Nikki tiptoeing behind Bear in this such a creepy way. It almost looks like she's a cat. And there are some people that have theories that the spirit of Sandy was inhabiting Nikki to get revenge on Bear, which is a creative thought for sure, and I actually really like it. The next thing we see is Sarah's naked corpse, propped up in a rocking chair. So Bear slowly turns to find Nikki, wearing Sarah's clothing and aggressively smoking because Sarah was smoking in the car earlier. She's even drawn on tattoos just like Sarah and styled her hair in a similar way. She asks, do you love me more now? She screams at Bear, why don't you love me? And bashes herself with the same brick she used on Sarah. We hear Ian at the door saying, Bear, open up. I got like $1 billion, dude. It's real. Nikki is staggering towards Bear. She says, oh God, I want to eat you up. I want to smell like you. While this is going on, by the way, there's a video of Bear playing on the TV where he's just sleeping, like most likely taken by Nikki. Nikki pulls a on him from what looks like probably between her legs, and she starts screaming in Bear's face that she's gonna off herself. Her face is pouring blood. It's barbaric. Ian hears the screaming and opens the door, and without hesitation, Nikki just pops him in the head. It's incredibly unexpected. We've only really just registered that she has a weapon at all. And if you remember at the beginning of the movie, Ian randomly told them at trivia night that Sarah's dad kept one in the break room at the music store. And her and Bear were just at the music store after killing Sarah, so immediately after laying Ian out, she screams the following right in Bear's face. I'll rip my fucking eyes out of my skull and stick the barrel in my Bear. Then she vomits on him. I love her. Bear starts screaming, I love you so much, because it's the only thing that Nikki wants to hear. She climbs into his arms and he starts consoling her, saying, "I love you so much. You're so beautiful. We can do this." He tells Nikki they need to get cleaned up and eat, and she agrees, and Bear heads towards the bathroom. He locks himself inside there, and Nikki is losing her mind, trying to beat the door down, pounding and screaming bloody murder. Bear keeps telling her, "Just 1 second, just give me a minute." And she suddenly stops beating on the door and calmly says, "Okay, thank you." From outside the door, Nikki says, "Hey, baby, I was thinking maybe we should break up." Bear contemplates himself. He puts it in his mouth, but ultimately doesn't do it. Nikki continues from the outside. "If it's space we need, then take it. It's gonna be okay." Bear takes the oxys out of the bathroom cabinet from earlier, and he downs the bottle. After a minute, he tries to make himself throw up, but right in that moment, we hear the One Wish willow break from outside the door. He leaves the bathroom and finds Nikki. They lovingly stare at each other. Freaky Nikki has used her wish to make Bear love her. They embrace and kiss, covered in blood. So hot. There's this soft, romantic melody playing during this, and it begins to distort as Bear begins to die. Nikki panics and tries to save Bear, but he's dying in her arms. She is sobbing, and we see her bring the weapon up to her mouth. But in that second, Bear dies, and we see real Nikki snap back into consciousness, and she proceeds to freak the fuck out naturally. She's screaming and crying. She shoves Bear off her lap. She's just trying to register what the hell is going on. The camera pans down to Bear, dead on the floor, and the movie ends as real Nikki continues to scream and cry. And that's Obsession, the best movie I have seen in a long time. I have so many thoughts, and I'm obsessed with this movie. Sorry for the pun. Before I talk about my feelings, I just want to say the cast of this movie was absolutely incredible. Indy Navarrete, I think is her name, who plays Nikki. She is going to have such a bright future in acting. I am so excited to see what she does. And Michael Johnston, who played Bear, just absolutely fantastic. Everybody killed it in this movie. When I finished writing these notes, this movie had grossed like $400 million, I think. And the budget was only $750, so that is an amazing profit. I think that Curry Barker has a very, very bright future in the horror genre. I have been watching some of his short form content and also a found footage film that he has on YouTube. So good. So good. Really enjoying his work. Very much looking forward to seeing what he does in the future. This is very quickly becoming an iconic horror movie. I know there are going to be so many Nikki and Bears for Halloween this year, and I am very much looking forward to seeing it. There's a lot of discussion on what was actually happening with Nikki, and Curry Barker said that it's not a possession movie and it's not an entity either, but rather an embodiment of what Bear wanted Nikki to be. So you notice that Freaky Nikki mimics Bear in a lot of ways. It's almost like she's partially sharing a brain with him. Like when she was first manifested, she says it was her cat that died, but then she corrects herself. And she also kind of cries in the same way that Bear does. She really like matches his energy a lot. Obviously, when he made the wish, he had no earthly idea what was going to happen. But once he figured out what was happening, he made pretty much zero attempts to fix things until it was far too late. He knew he was assaulting Nikki and he did nothing. Speaking of his wish, I think that that's where we first learned Nikki's full name, Nikki Freeman, which is definitely an ironic last name. Like I said, a version of the script is available online, and there are a lot of differences from the actual film to the script. And the essay scene after the restaurant was originally a lot worse. It featured a moment of real Nikki coming to and Bear just kind of waiting it out before finishing. I think the scene we got was just as impactful, and I'm very glad they decided to shorten it. There is some interesting discourse around the scene where Nikki gives Bear the Tiger's Eye stone. She had said it was for confidence and willpower so he could become a food critic, and I thought it was weird because we had only just in that moment found out that he wanted to do that. So a lot of people are saying this showed Nikki giving away the last of her protection to Bear, as Tiger's Eye does symbolize that. But I saw another theory that I liked a lot better. Real Nikki was actually the one that gifted that to Bear because Tiger's Eye is known to enhance mental clarity. So real Nikki was hoping the stone would give him the clarity he needed to know what he was doing was wrong. But Wish Nikki took the food critic thing and ran with it. And I wish I had the name of the Reddit user who I read that theory from because I think that that's just fantastic. So I want to talk about Ian now. When Nikki was in the car with Bear in the beginning, she said, when she has a crush, no one ever knows. And obviously, that was said to make us think that she likes Bear, when in reality, it was Ian, and we didn't know. She also said that Bear is not a total brick wall, and she kind of had this thoughtful look on her face, and obviously, again, she was referring to Ian, but we had no idea. I love a red herring. Ian was intentionally giving Bear bad advice about how to win Nikki over, especially with the idea to call her Freaky Nikki, and I'm not really sure if he was actually concerned about Nikki being taken advantage of by Bear, or if Ian was just pissed that he thought Nikki was with Bear and not him. I tend to think Ian was jealous because he didn't go to Nikki. He kept going to Bear about the situation. No one tried to help Nikki directly. They all just went right to Bear. I don't think that Ian's a great person, and I don't think what he and Nikki had was serious, but at least he seemed interested in who Nikki actually was as a person. Sarah too. Like they knew that she wasn't close with her dad, but Bear didn't. Bear is just the worst. He didn't care about Nikki at all. He was infatuated with her. From the beginning, he disregarded her feelings. When she told him that she was quitting, he got annoyed. He was upset because he wouldn't get to see her all the time. He didn't actually care that she was unhappy there. Also, when they first kissed, he was under the impression that she was messed up. She even said it herself. Now, she wasn't fucked up. She was under the effects of Bear's wish. But still, in Bear's brain, she was drunk. And he still kissed her. He hesitated, but he didn't say, like, hey, are you sure? Or, you know what, let's not, you're drunk. No, he wanted it, so he took it. Everything he did during the course of this movie was selfish and cowardice. The one part I cannot get over is him saying, would it be so bad to be with me? And walking out of the room while she begged him to end it for her. That whole scene made my blood run cold, and the following scene where it's revealed that Bear was probably drugging Nikki, the worst. Go to jail. While Bear is the true villain in this movie, Ian and Sarah suck too. Both of them thought something was going on with Nikki. Neither bothered to try to help her. Sarah even tried to swoop in on Bear right after the party where Nikki bashed herself in the face. Like, girl, what are you doing? I have seen people say that Sarah was a totally innocent victim, like collateral damage. And yeah, like she was collateral damage in the way she didn't deserve to die, but she didn't have any redeeming qualities in my eyes. The things she did were self-serving and in an attempt to win Bear over. And Ian too. He couldn't just be honest with Bear and say, hey man, Nikki and I have been hooking up. I don't think your feelings are going to be reciprocated. Instead, he set Bear up for failure and gave him advice that would ultimately hurt Nikki and probably their friendship too. Nikki had no one in her corner, and it broke my heart for her the entire film. She is my sweet baby girl. I love her. In a film that showcases women losing control over their autonomy, having Sarah's death be drawn out and gruesome compared to Ian's that was quick and painless felt very intentional to me. And there's even an extended scene where we realize that Sarah was actually alive for a time after her attack, as Bear can hear her wheezing. I also really enjoyed how this film used color and light to tell a story. Red was used a lot for Nikki. Her hair was glowing. She wore a lot of red clothing as Freaky Nikki. It was definitely a contrast to real Nikki, and it was an intentional choice by the costume director, Blair James. She said that the outfit that we saw real Nikki wear was Nikki dressing for herself. And once she was Freaky Nikki, she was dressing for like Bear's version of how he wanted Nikki to look. And as for the lighting, we see Freaky Nikki shrouded in darkness a lot. They used shadows to play up that like uncanny valley feel, especially in that bedroom scene. And I really liked that they didn't overdo it either. It was just done a handful of times. And I think if they did it much more, it would have lost that uneasy feeling. And they didn't use CGI for anything. It was all like makeup on Nikki's face and lighting. It was really well done. I honestly could go on, and I considered doing like an entire separate video of my thoughts and opinions. So I just tried to condense it down as much as possible, but that's obsession. That's obsession, my new obsession. So I really hope that you all enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love if you subscribed and maybe leave me a like or a comment, say hello. If you like ASMR content, I will have all my other channels linked down below. I had so much fun here today. I cannot wait to see you next time. Later, alligators.